Hi, how is everybody tonight? We are headed on a Pegasus trip. I have an audience from a distance again tonight. The three little ones are listening from out of state, and this is pretty exciting. So this is our second time doing it remotely, so we're pretty excited about that. So Grandma can tell them a story, even though she's a whole state away. So here we go. Tonight, it's Tia, Desmond, and Lindley, and we're going to let's take Luke along. We'll just take Luke. We'll just take the four younger ones because I think we need somebody a little older. So anyways, the children are all watching Grandma tell the story. And once again, since they're not looking out the window, there they are. Just like that. Although they expected it, they're on Pegasus's back. And it's raining outside, just raining, 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 raining. But you know what? They're warm and they're all cuddled up together, and they head north because they're going to go up to Minnesota and pick up Luke. So up they go. Pegasus is chattering away, telling him all the adventures he's had, how he's been at a lake and at the ocean, and he's been with some of his friends and helping out with some other things. And he's telling them all kinds of things, and the children are telling him about their day at home, and they're being homeschooled since we've got the coronavirus, so they're at home and not in school anymore. So they head up north and they go over top of Luke's house, and Luke is just totally surprised because it's not even bedtime yet, and he ends up on the back. So we've got Luke in the back, then Desmond, then Tia and little Lindley. And they say to Pegasus, "Where are we going tonight?" He says, "We're going back in time." So he shoots straight up. Straight up, and the children have to hang on so tight so they don't fall off, and they're going higher and higher and higher, and then they turn and they go east, and they go fast. And this is when he shoots like an arrow. He starts his wings going and his legs are going, and he's just going as fast as he can, and his body is stretched out, his nose is out, his tail's out, his body is stretched as far as it can go, and he's shooting as fast through the air as an arrow out of a bow, just like the other times when we go back in time. He goes back 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, not 60, 50 some years, 60 years and more. And he's back in time, and again, we're on the farm where so much fun happens. And right away, out run 5 children. And one of them they recognize right away. It's Grandma Debi. She's got brown hair and brown eyes. Yes, the other 5, or the other 4, they all have blonde hair and blue eyes. But there's Grandma, and she's about 8, 9 years old, just about Desmond's age. And they all start chattering and talking and sharing what's going on in the world that Des and Tia and Lindley live in, and the world of 60 years ago that Grandma Debi lived in. And, of course, Tia and Desmond, they all have shoes on. Well, guess what? Debi and her sisters and brothers, they don't have shoes on. They're dirty. They've been playing on the farm all day. They're just having a grand time. Their hair is a mess, you know. So anyways, they said, "What are we going to do?" And they said, "Oh, we have this most fun thing we get to do a couple times a summer." He said, "So," and they said, "We have to go in here into the shed, and we're going to get some buckets." So they went in and they got these buckets. They're metal buckets with metal handles, and some of them were wire, and they're called egg baskets. But we had buckets too because we had so many kids. So as many buckets as they could find, each one got one. Lindley got a little tiny one, okay? And hers was made out of balsa wood, so it was a little wooden basket. It had 2 little handles on it, so she could carry it. It wasn't too heavy. So anyways, what are we going to do? I said, "We're going to collect eggs." Grandpa said a bunch of the hens have been, they were going to lay. So they were laying eggs all over the farm. Some in buildings, some not in buildings, some in the haymow. And what they did was they would lay the eggs. Well, sometimes the eggs didn't turn into chickens. And so they would lay in the nest after the other chicks were born, or none of them were born, and the hens would go off with their brood of little chicks, and these eggs would be left in the nest that the chickens had made. Oh, and sometimes there was goose eggs. Now, we talked about the granary the other day. The granary was above the ground, and there was an area about 2 2 feet or something off and on between 2 and 3 feet underneath. So you could crawl underneath. Well, so could the chickens and the guineas and the ducks and the geese and the peacocks, all of them. And so we started in every single building seeing if we could find eggs. Now, what we weren't supposed to do was to go in the hen house because that's where the good eggs were. But we also knew we could find them in there. And somebody, I don't know who, which one, snuck into that hen house and got a bunch of eggs. So there wasn't many eggs to collect the next morning because they were gone. So climbed along the edge of the chicken coop, found a nest, gathered maybe 10 eggs. Went underneath another chicken building, a hen house, found some more inside and out. And now there's 8 of us, right? Tia and Lindley and Desmond and Luke, and there's 9, and then all of Debbie and her brother and sisters. So it took them half of the day to collect these eggs. Oh, and they got under the granary and way back. And now, mind you, it's dirty under there. There's chicken feathers and chicken doo-doo and everything else. And climbing through that, you would think today everybody would yell because they were getting dirty, but kids did that all the time. So they were crawling around underneath there and they found goose eggs that didn't hatch. Now, goose eggs were like this big around. Yeah, they were great big. And there were a few peacock eggs left. And there were guineas. And we find those in the pasture. They would sometimes lay right in the middle of a field or out in a pasture. And they would just make a nest along a building or out in the grassy area. And we collected them. And they're little. And they're kind of triangle like this. So they're kind of, not a point, but a rounded edge like this. And the thing about guinea eggs is they're very, very hard. It's really hard to break them. And goose eggs, they're hard too. Now, hen's eggs, they're easier to break. But remember, there were all kinds of chickens. And each of the chickens laid a different kind of egg, a different color, different size, different shape. So after and then the real fun was getting up in the haymow. So they had to help the little ones because the ladder is straight up. So they had to help the little ones to get up there, and they went around the bales of hay, and the chickens would get up there, and they would get down in. And sometimes they would go back tied a little bit of a tunnel, and so you had to go back in there. So they let Lindley, she was the littlest one, crawl on her belly and get back in there and feel around for the eggs. And they found the eggs, and she handed them out, and they put them in the bucket. And when they were done, they had like 2 full buckets of all kinds of eggs. Now, what in the world do you suppose they're going to do with these eggs? Now, guys, this is a true story, okay? This really happened more than once, every summer. So what they did was they went to the big barn, they went outside, and they went clear to the north, and there was a lean-to. So we had the big barn, and then there was a building that was built on that was a lean-to where there was a calving where they had the calves, and then there was another building where they kept some farm machinery. But there was a roof on that, lower roof, and the wall. There was a wall that was maybe, 10 feet tall, maybe about 8 feet. And what the kids did, and Grandpa gave it to them. They went up to the house and they said, Grandpa, we've gathered all the eggs like you asked us to. And they showed them to him. Showed him all the eggs. And he said, okay. And he said, come with me to the woodshed. So he went out to the woodshed because there wasn't a garage. And he started hunting around on these messy desks, or not desks, wood workbenches with all kinds of things, the tools up here and all the other things, saws and screwdrivers and wrenches and screws and bolts and nuts and everything. And he found about 3 cans or 4 of spray paint that were partially gone, all different colors, some black, some yellow, some red, and he gave it to the children and he said, now you make sure you don't get this on you. You know where this goes, so make sure that you be careful with it. And he sent all those kids that were like under 13 years old down to Lindley, who's 2, out with cans of spray paint on the farm. Oh my goodness. And we ran And the children ran. They were so excited. They had their buckets. They had to be careful. And they had their cans of spray paint. And they went to the far north barn, to that lean-to with the wall. And they had something to stand on, a stool, a ladder part. And they got up there and they made a huge circle with that spray paint. And then another circle inside of it. And in the middle, they made a bullseye. And they spray painted it solid. So this bullseye was probably 8 feet around. It was huge. Then they got their buckets and their cans of spray paint. And they walked back, 20 feet or more. And the oldest one, Sharon, she insisted on going first. She got the softest egg she could find, a chicken egg, a white one. And she took that egg and she hauled off and threw it as hard as she could and splat, smack, right on that barn. And it just turned into scrambled eggs with shells in it right on the side of that building. Everybody yipped and yelled and jumped up and down and yelled, me next, me next. So each one had got an egg in their hand. And what happened is the littler kids, they couldn't throw it that far. So they would go up closer and they'd throw an egg. And they had to take turns so that everybody got a goose egg. And when they got all done, there were the guinea eggs left. They were the little ones. So they each took some guinea eggs, and it took them over an hour. They were throwing these eggs. Now here's the catch. Some of those eggs broke and some of them didn't. Some of them, when they hit that wall, they exploded because they were rotten. Yeah. And smell, stinks so bad you wanted to throw up. You gagged. Even though you were 10 feet away. And some of them were regular eggs and they turned into scrambled eggs. Now, here's the sad part, but it's true and it's how it is on the farm. Some of them had baby chicks in them that didn't live or didn't fully develop. And so that was kind of sad when you throw them and then they go plunk and drop. But that's reality. That's what it was like on the farm. Some eggs hatched, some eggs didn't, some chicks died, some didn't. So now all they have left in the bucket is the little guinea eggs. So Sharon, the oldest one, she takes one, she throws it as hard as she can, and it doesn't break. Hits the wall, doesn't break. Well, okay, so what do you have to do? The next person gets their egg and they move closer. And it smells. And there's scrambled eggs and all kinds of stuff on the ground. Takes their egg, throws it as hard as they can. Doesn't break. Hits, rolls down on the ground. So they move a little closer, and everybody's gagging because it just stinks so bad. Grabs the egg, and the third one, which would have been, first one was Sharon. Debbie was second, so it would have been one of the twins. It would have been Luke, probably. Luke took it, and he threw it as hard as he could, smack, cracked, and exploded because it was rotten. And when I say explode, I mean really poof, like that. Just spreads all over. Now, when you're getting closer and an egg explodes, where do you suppose it might go? Yeah, so you had to be careful because sometimes it would come back at you. So anyways, but it was so much fun throwing them. So then each of the other ones got an egg and threw it. Some of them broke, some of them didn't. So we're all gagging because we wanted to throw up, but it was just so much fun throwing the eggs. So everybody gets their buckets and moves back and decide, what are we going to do? Well, you can't leave the eggs there that aren't broken, right? You just can't do that. So the younger ones are Roger and Tia and Lindley. So they tell the little ones, you have to go up and get those eggs. Well, the little ones are wanting to throw up, right? Well, Lindley finally says, no, she's going to go back to the house. But they talk Tia and, who's the other one? Tia and Roger into going up. And they take a bucket each and they go up there. And I'm really, Tia actually pukes. And Roger, he's kind of got a weak stomach. He's spitting out stuff too. But and now these eggs that are down there are covered with rotten eggs and everything else. So they throw them in the bucket and they take them back. And because they went up and got the rotten eggs, they got to throw them next. But to do it, they had to get closer because they're little. So they would throw them and sometimes they'd break and sometimes they didn't. But Tia and Roger refused to go up and get the unbroken eggs this time. And so the twins, Marlene and Darlene, had to go up. And they both threw up, just threw up. But they didn't quit doing it. They got him, brought him back, and then they threw the eggs until they were all broken. And about that time, now, so this big bullseye is just splattered with everything from brown, yuck, to yellow and white eggs. And it smells to high heaven. And Grandpa appears over on the fence, puts his arm up like this and said, "How'd it go, gang?" Oh, we had a great time. Everybody said it was so much fun. Come and see, come and see. So we opened the gate and he came through. Oh, he said, "This smells so bad." I said, "Yeah," but he said, "You've done a good job. You collected the eggs." He says, "It looks like some of these weren't rotten, though." Well, nobody understood that. Didn't know why that was the case, and certainly didn't tell Grandpa. But we've learned Grandpa probably knew all along. He probably knew all along. So anyways, he said, "Gather up all your things." And they were stinky. The buckets were stinky, and the paint was stinky, and come on out to the front yard. So into the farmyard, the front barnyard we went. Everybody went, all the Debbie and her siblings, and Luke and Tia and Desmond and Lindley. Lindley was already up there. And Grandpa had filled some tubs, some big tubs like this, metal tubs, wash tubs they called them. He had filled them with water. Now it was warm out, but that water came from the well. And guess what? It was cold. But he said, "You've had your fun. Now in you go." And then he went over and he got a hose. And you know what he did with that hose, don't you? Huh? He started spraying us. So into the tubs we went, sprayed, and Grandma brought out some shampoo and some bars of soap. And in this cold, cold water with our clothes on, because we're going to get the clothes clean too, we scrubbed up, and then he said, "Go dry off." So away we went, but he said, "Don't go into the barns until you're dry." So we had to play in the front yard and the backyard and everything. And it was just a grand time. But I'll tell you where we didn't go. We didn't go to the north side of the barn because it smelled so bad. And you know, Grandma had lunch ready, but nobody was ready to eat it because we all were like, oh. But the most fun was throwing those guinea eggs and trying to break them. But it was just so cool to take a big old goose egg you knew wasn't any good, that was rotten, and throw it against that wall and watch it explode. So much fun. So that was one of the adventures, and we did that several times each summer. And Grandpa would pay us 2 cents an egg to find them, because he didn't want those eggs out there. He didn't want the critters coming and eating those eggs, like mink and weasels and raccoons. They would come and try to get those eggs and eat them, and he didn't want those critters on the farm. So that's why he would pay us 2 cents an egg. And what did we do with that 2 cents? We would go to Bern, Indiana, to the candy store, and we would have our money, which was usually 10 cents a piece, and we would get a whole bag this big. Sometimes the candy was 2 cents, or two pieces for a penny. Sometimes it was 5 pieces for a penny. And sometimes we'd get those for a whole penny or 2 pennies. We'd get those wax lips or Coca-Cola with the juice in them. They were paraffin. Oh, or bubble gum. 10 cents bought us a whole bag of candy. And we wouldn't just eat it. We would eat it for weeks, 1 piece at a time. It was wonderful. So anyways, that's what we did on the farm with the eggs, and that's how we spent our money. And it was a grand time. And I hope you enjoyed going to the farm. Because when they got back into the front yard and they had dried off in the sun, Pegasus was there. They all were ready to go. They scampered on his back and told him all about it all the way home. Well, first they said bye to Grandma Debbie and all of their aunts and uncles, and said goodbye. And the 4 children then got on Pegasus's back, and he said, "Hang on, we've got to get back. We're running late." And he went as high as he could, and then he headed west, just as fast as he could go, like an arrow, shot out of a bow. And before they knew it, there they were, back on their bed, watching Grandma Debbie tell a story. So each one reached in their pocket to see what treasure that they had found. And what did Desmond find in his pocket? he found a big old goose egg, and it was golden. Ah, none of the eggs on the farm were golden, but his was. And Tia reached in hers, and she had a blue peacock egg. It was so pretty. And Luke reached in his pocket, and he had several. There were several kind of hooked together of the guinea eggs. And little Lindley, she had something called a pullet egg. It was a little tiny egg. It's a young chicken that lays an egg. And it's little tiny and round sometimes. And so hers was special too. But it was brown because it was a brown chicken, or the breed that laid brown eggs. And they put it back in their pocket. And Tia said, I know we were really there. And wasn't it fun with Grandma Debbie? And they all said, yeah, she's fun, and so are her sisters and brothers. So children, that's a story for tonight. I hope you enjoyed a real live for real story from the farm on Indiana, Ohio State Line Road. Good night.